Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Mackinnon with Triathlon Magazine Canada, and I am here with Jackson Laundry. Got your shirt on now so we can't see all the scars, but I am living, or I can actually be a witness that you're recovering like crazy from your nutty accident.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's been about 10 and a half weeks now, and definitely a lot of tough days in there, especially towards the beginning. Before the surgery, after the surgery, shortly after, it was really tough. But since about 3 or 4 days after the surgery, I've been able to continually keep moving and just let the body heal through movement. So I've been stretching. I've been doing as much training as I can, and that seems to be helping a lot. Every time I kind of sit down and have a day of laziness or don't do much or sit in a car for a long time, then things start to stiffen up and don't feel as good. So the more I do, the better I feel, it seems like.
So you've got one more surgery, or I'm not sure. Is it just one more? You've certainly got another one coming up in a few days.
Yeah, I hope it's just the one more. It's supposed to be. So I just have to basically get a temporary piece of metal removed. Unfortunately, because of where my collarbone broke, they couldn't just put a flat plate on top and leave it. It broke right at the end, so they had to put this extra piece on to hold the end on, and that's causing some problems now. It seems to be my limiter at this point, where that piece of metal is actually causing a lot of irritation in some of the ligaments and tendons in that area. So once I get that off, things should actually improve a lot, hopefully, and it should be a very easy surgery to recover from compared to the first one, at least.
It sounds... Let's take a step back. So you're coming off an amazing season that includes a big win at 70.3 Tremblant, head off to the Worlds in Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about, what happened there?
Yeah, well, that was it was the biggest race of the year for me. I really had a big training block focused on that race, and I was feeling really good for the race. I tapered fully, and I'd actually reconned the bike course twice. I actually rode the descent, which is where I ended up crashing twice before the race, so I felt really ready. And unfortunately in the race, I was in a good position. Like, I was in a pretty good position on the bike. I was in 22nd place, I believe, and I was descending. I was on my own and following my plan, and then another athlete passed me, Eric Lagerstrom, who's a phenomenal descender on bikes. He's spent a lot of time in mountains and just a ton of time on a bike in his life. And he's just very skilled, and I decided to try to go with him. And that was where I kind of made my mistake, because I needed to follow my own lines and my own visual cues, but I was basing it off of him. And of course, when you're watching someone else, there's always a bit of a delay, so he would slow down, and then by the time I slowed down, it was a little later. So going into a sharp turn, they're all blind turns, because there's like a wall on the side where you're turning into, so you can't see the end. And I thought it was kind of more of a gradual turn, and it was actually a very sharp turn once I got past the first part. So I couldn't slow down in time, and I slid basically off the road and then flew off my bike and crashed into a post with my shoulder. So I hit my shoulder right here on the back. I was kind of rolling, and my scapula broke into about a dozen pieces, and my collarbone broke right at the end. And that was basically it.
Yeah, I guess so. So you end up coming back here for the surgery.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there was some time in a hospital in France. That must have been a little scary.
Yeah. Well, it took about 3.5 hours to get to the hospital, unfortunately, just because of where I crashed. It was this remote kind of mountain road in France. And with all the athletes on the course still, the ambulance really had to be careful on the way down and drive really slowly, and that was probably that was the most difficult part of the whole thing, was from the crash to getting to the hospital, because with the bumpy and windy roads, like, the movement caused in my shoulder was causing excruciating pain, so it was really tough. Once I got to the hospital, I was able to at least stay reasonably still, and that kind of allowed me to feel a little bit better. But I mean, they were just overwhelmed with athletes, because it was such a dangerous course that there was, and even though I was probably the first one to crash, or one of the first, I was so far up the mountain that I was one of the last ones to arrive. So I was like in that hospital for about 8 hours, and just getting x-rays and stuff. I needed some stitches. The back of my hand here needed stitches, which needed to be fixed the next day because they kind of messed them up the first time. But I was definitely happy to get on the plane back home the next day and get to Canada and see some, some doctors here that, first off, I can understand fully. I mean, I was speaking French all day. I know some French and I was doing okay, but it's still a lot different to really hear something explained properly.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does the doctor tell you when you get back here?
Well, the first place I went was the Ajax Fracture Clinic, or Shoulder Center, I believe it's called. And I think it was the nurse that was initially looking at the x-ray, and I said, "What did I break?" And he said, "Yes." Which meant everything was pretty much broken, which actually wasn't fully true, because I could have also broken the head of my humerus, which would have been really bad, because then everything would have been broken. That was the one thing I didn't break, so that was good. And from there, it was just a matter of getting referred to the orthopedic specialist at Sunnybrook, Dr. Patrick Henry, who's really got a lot of experience with specifically fixing bones of the shoulder. So he was the guy, and he has some experience in athletics as well. So that was another key thing, to have a doctor who understands that I'm going to be recovering differently than most people.
Yeah, it's always good news when there's one bone in your shoulder that you haven't broken.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So after that, like most normal humans would say, okay, I'm going to spend the next year recovering. You're not one of those normal people. You, we were just, as I was saying, watching you do some of your exercises earlier. I understand the doctor's never seen anyone bounce back from an injury like this as fast as you have. What gives with that?
Well, I think probably a couple of things. One, probably the most important one, is just that I know that you have to put yourself through a little bit of discomfort to get improvement, just like with training. So even early on, I was moving my arm, trying to get as much motion as I could, because you're just not going to recover if you don't push a little bit further than what feels comfortable. So I've always done that the whole way through. And then the other piece being that when you're a professional athlete, we train ourselves to recover very quickly from training every day, and it's not really any different recovering from a much bigger sort of insult on the body, which is it's like a surgery. So recovering from that basically is just like recovering from training, and my body is used to recovering from training, so it seems to be able to recover from bigger things quickly as well. But it certainly feels like a long time to me. But yeah, I mean, I've told people, and this might be one of your next questions, that my first race is hoping to be in March, if not March, April. Then I don't really see any other options. Like, I'm going to be back to training, and I'm just going to get back into my rhythm, and things might take a little longer than typical to improve in the swim, but we'll see, and I'll just work with what I got.
Okay, so yeah, I didn't have the guts to ask when the first race was going to be, so I'm very glad that you brought that up. But what's wrong with just saying I'm going to see when I can do my first race?
Well, I've kind of done that. I've given that first race in March, which is 70.3 Campeche. That's kind of a maybe race at this point, but based on what I've done so far, I know that my bike and run are going to be unaffected. At this point, the run is limited slightly, but as soon as that surgery happens, it should essentially have no limits. The bike's not going to have any limits, so it's just going to be the swim. And I know it's going to improve, like the bones are healed, so it's really just a matter of going and swimming and letting my muscles strengthen and be able to handle the load again. And I might not be as fast as I've been before when I get to that first race, but it doesn't really matter, because I think racing is another part of the recovery process. I could wait a year, but then I haven't raced for a year, and then I have to learn how to race again. So even if I'm not 100%, I'm going to go race, and that's going to be part of my journey back to where I was.
A lot of people, when they heard that you had broken your shoulder and everything, big fear that was a career-ending injury. Did that ever cross your mind?
It definitely did. It crossed my mind briefly before I kind of saw any doctors, but one of the first things that the doctor said back in Canada was that I think you're going to make a full recovery from this. Full recovery to the extent of being able to swim like I could before, being able to bike and run like I could. He said, you know, if I was a baseball pitcher, then I probably would never pitch again, because as triathletes, we're operating at a much lower than maximal kind of load on our bodies, and it's limited by our endurance, not our
Right.
kind of peak force. So I may not be able to do a 50-meter sprint as fast as I could ever again. That's possible, but when we're operating at an aerobic level, for the most part, I shouldn't have any problems. It might affect my training a little bit. We'll see, but I think I'm going to come back, because there's no other way to think. Like, I just have to think I'm coming back, and it's just a matter of doing that every day, whatever I can to do that. So that's my mindset, and I'll just see where it gets me as time goes on.
For you, it's been, I don't know if a long journey, but it's been, you know, quite a journey to getting to the point where you're, you know, winning 70.3 races amongst the best in the world over that distance. I'm guessing it'll be pretty damn satisfying to be back doing that again next summer.
Yeah, for sure. At this point, it's, you know, once you've had like you said, like it could have been a career-ending injury, or, I mean, at the time I still had 4 or 5 races planned for the year, so it felt like a big, you know, loss for me to miss out on all those races, and it was, but just to be able to go back and race again is like, it's now I have a whole new appreciation for just being able to go and train at a high level and race at a high level. So I'm trying not to set too many expectations for, you know, what I'll be able to do in terms of results, but it really makes you appreciate once you have something that you can't do anymore. Like, I couldn't swim, I could hardly move for weeks. So just to be able to go and do that again is, yeah, it feels amazing, and it will feel amazing when I can do it more. I mean, I'm swimming 2 minutes per 100 if I'm lucky for a 100 right now, so that's going to have to come down a lot. But just the first time I was able to get in the water was amazing, and I'm sure it'll be the same the first time I do anything, the first time I race again, the first time I you know, actually can sprint in the water or do some efforts. Like, those things are all going to be good experiences, so I'm looking forward to it.
For you, you know, you've been on this sort of nice rise and everything. Has this affected your goals or made them more stronger maybe, or?
I don't think it has. I mean, I've always kind of had the vision of, I'm going to try to get to the best level I can at the 70.3 distance. And I think I can get top 10. I think I could have got top 10 at Worlds this year. I think I can next year and the year after. So for now, I hope I can qualify for 70.3 Worlds again. And that's going to be my main goal for 2020. And then I think I can get top 10 there. So it's just a matter of continuing. Like, this might be a little setback, but in the long term, if anything, I'll be stronger for this with all the lessons I've learned. And I've had a lot of time to reflect on, you know, what have I done with my career? What have I done in my training? What things have worked for me? What haven't? You know, and really honed in on what I think works for me. And this year, I think my training is going to improve a lot, and I think I'll be even better for it once I've kind of got past this setback.
You might have already answered many of those questions. What have you learned from this, other than, you know, sort of the training stuff?
Well, that's a good question. First off, from the actual crash, I learned, like, you gotta, you know, sometimes you have to take a risk, but sometimes it doesn't pay off, and in this case it didn't. But you do have to really trust yourself, and that's kind of what I didn't do in the race. Is I kind of abandoned my plan and what I was gonna do, and tried to do what somebody else was doing, and that at that time it wasn't the right choice. But the other thing I've learned is, like, you just have to, this is more from reflecting on my training and everything, you just have to do what works for you. You could ask 10 different pros what their training's like, and it's all different. And really just thinking about what does work. Learn from the lessons of, you know, oh, this week was a terrible week of training. Why was that? What'd you feel? Did you not sleep enough? Did you not sleep at the right times? Did you not eat properly? Were you not training with the right group of people? Were you not training enough on your own? Like, all those little questions. And you just have to constantly be a student and be learning about yourself the whole way through, or else you're just going to get stuck in this groove, and you're not going to keep learning and improving. So that's what I'm going to keep trying to do, and I think I'm doing that more now than I ever have before.
I've been amazed at how positive and upbeat you have been through all of this. maybe I'm not seeing all of the times. Do you feel like you're even more, or being able to, or what has been enabled you to have that attitude through it?
Well, I mean, there are positives that come out of it. Like I said, I've had this opportunity to reflect and kind of improve myself, but also, like, I got pretty lucky with this injury. I mean, typically when you break your shoulder blade or scapula, there's most of the time, about 80% of the time, you're going to break ribs or your neck or have concussions or things like that. So I got extremely lucky that I didn't have any of those accessory injuries that could have been way worse. So that kind of was a positive. But also just, I mean, it allowed me a chance to do some other things too. Like, I had an extended off season, so I had more time to spend with friends and family and go do some things that, I wouldn't necessarily otherwise have had time to do. And there's always kind of, I'm inspired by these other athletes that have had injuries probably worse than mine and come back and been even stronger after it. So Andrew Starkowicz is an example. He's had some catastrophic injuries and he's come back and wins 70.3s all the time. And people like that have done that. And this is, in the grand scheme of things, people have come back from worse and still been better than they were before the injury. So I know I can do the same thing. It's just a matter of just doing it, getting to work and doing it.
Well, it sounds like you are well on your way, and I'm looking forward to a fantastic season next year. But don't rush it.
I'll try not to. Just not re-injuring myself will be a victory. So
there you go. That's a good, very simple goals. Well, this is Jackson Laundry, well on his way on the recovery front. I'm Kevin Mackinnon. Thanks for joining us here at Triathlon Magazine Canada.